Ladies and gentlemen, it's really an honor to be here today and to share with you some words on why we're all in this room here today. You see, the United Way is an organization that helps people that were once like me, my relatives, my sisters and brothers, my cousins, and so on. And many of the people that you know in your communities across this country and in this province, I've been impacted by this amazing organization. It only takes one person to change another person's life, one leader to change an organization, to change a city, to help people in need. I wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't for the people before me who have done that for me, for my ancestors, my mother, strangers, coaches, and so on. When I was a kid, I grew up on this place called Big River First Nation up until I was about 5 years old. Who's ever heard of Big River First Nation before? Okay, awesome. So Big River First Nation, that's between Prince Albert and north of Spiritwood, roughly. And when I was living there, my mother and my father were together. I rarely saw my father. But my mother was there, and she was always watching myself and my three younger siblings. So I'm the oldest of my siblings. There's myself, Kendra, Farah, and Marisha. So I'm the only boy in the family. And one day, I noticed that what was normal to me was not so normal to other people. And what was normal to me was watching my mom watch us all the time. And I thought that was normal, that my dad would never be home. But when he would come home, it wasn't so normal. You see, they had a lot of arguments to the point where my mom would have to send us inside the house or send us outside the house because they're going to have another argument. And I didn't realize that was toxic as a kid. I didn't realize until I was a young man that that was totally unhealthy. In fact, one day my whole life changed. So think about where you come from right now. Think about the first incident that really changed your life. Some of you, it's when maybe you're 3, 4 years old. Maybe it's when you're 5, 10 years old. I don't know when that is for you, but think about that moment. When I was 5 years old, summer was just around the corner, and the kindergarten was just finished. And I used to get dropped off on this long gravel road, and my house was about maybe 5 times the size of this room, and there's tall trees on each side of the road. Gravel, bumpy road, and I get dropped off over here. Along there would be my house at the back of the room. And one day I got dropped off at the road. I was visiting my friends and I coming back home. It was another normal day. And again, my father wasn't there. But when I got closer to the house, I could see that there was a commotion happening in front of my house. And when I was walking, I could see there was a pickup truck I had never seen before. In the pickup truck, I could see that my sister Kendra, Farah, and Marisha were getting put in the back seat. I could see my mom, and I'm getting closer now. I'm watching. I could see my mother. She's going back and forth, grabbing these bags, throwing me in the back of this pickup truck, grabbing these boxes, putting in the back of the pickup truck, frantically. And I'm walking closer, and I'm starting to pick up my pace now. I'm walking. I go up to my mom, and I said, "Mom, what are you doing? What's going on?" She's like, "Kendal, go inside right now. Pack up your bag. We're going to go somewhere for a while." So me, I'm 5 years old, I'm just a kid. I don't know what's happening. I thought we were going to go to this place called Prince Albert, and we did. I went inside, I grabbed my backpack, and who remembers that show, The Ninja Turtles? All right, so I had a Ninja Turtles backpack. I put my toys in there. I threw it in the back of the pickup truck. I jump in the back seat. I'm excited to go to Prince Albert because in Prince Albert, when we would go there, which was rare, there was a place we would usually stop. It was called Walmart. And Walmart was a special place for a kid, and some of you maybe have children, so you know that when you take your kids to Walmart, you don't use a certain aisle you don't go to, right? Because once you go there, they're there, and you have to get them some. So I was one of those kids. I used to love going to Walmart, but I remember getting to Prince Albert, and we're in the back of that pickup truck, we're driving. All of a sudden, we pass Walmart. So I'm like, shucks. We check ourselves into this hotel room. There's fluorescent lights in this room. And we get there and we stay there for 1-2 nights. I think things are okay. We go to a different room, 1-2 nights. Then we go to Saskatoon, up to a week. Then we go to North Battleford, 1-2 nights. And I'm like, what is going on? Where's our dad? Why aren't we home? When I became a young man and I totally forgot about all that stuff that happened, I remember I was a young man and I asked my mom about that question. I said, remember that time we stayed in those hotel rooms? My mom went, hold on a second. Those were not hotel rooms we stayed at. I said, how old were you when you remember that? I was about 5 years old. That day, We left your dad's. I made a decision. You see, I left your dad that day. I made a decision. I was going to give you and your 3 younger sisters an opportunity to have success in this thing that we call life. It wouldn't have happened if you probably stayed over there. So I made a decision, and I sacrificed that part of my life so you guys could have an opportunity here. So I'm like a teenager, and I'm hearing this. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. I was like, well, where were those hotel rooms you were staying? Was that a hotel? He's like, no, those are women's shelters for single mothers who had no place to go for their children. It's like single mother shelters. So we would stay at those places for several weeks. And one day, my mother concluded the story that the thing that saved us in those shelters was one day she got a call on this thing called the payphone. Is that too old for everyone in the crowd? All right. So they're talking on the payphone, my mom and my kukum. Our kukum is our grandma in our language. So my kukum and my mother are speaking in Cree. And one day, when they're talking on that phone, my grandma, she pries it open for my mom. How are the kids doing? What is going on? My mom confesses that we're kind of homeless. We don't have a place to go. She left my father. My grandma, super kind person, right? I know a lot of you have a lot of those grandparents that are super kind and generous. My grandma was the same way. She took us into her home. We moved from where we were to Sweetgrass First Nation, where my mother grew up and where I'm registered in my First Nation. And we get to Sweetgrass, and my kukum lived on top of this nice hill, a 1-bedroom house. So we get to her house. And you know that feeling when you go to your grandma's house, right, or a grandparent's or a loving person, it just feels good, right? It's a feeling that you get there. So I felt really safe walking in there. And my kukum had a room over there, but at the end of her living room was a nice long couch. She's like, you guys can sleep over there. My mother slept right here. I slept right beside her on the floor. My sister Kendra, my sister Farah, and my baby sister Marisha is an infant. She stayed with my mom on the couch. So we stayed there for another 2 months, living with my kukum, learning from her, learning values about respect and so on. 2 months later, my mom gets another phone call. And the phone call says, Inez, my mother's name, you and your children can come live in this house over here. We're moving out. We're going to the city now, North Balford. If you don't move into this house, someone else is going to come and take this house. So I suggest you come and move into it right away. I'm going to time out real quickly. Just a little tip here. Back in the day, and a lot of it still is the same, for First Nations people, I can't legally go and buy a house on my reserve and say, I'm going to build it. Okay? The only time back then was if you got a house, is if the band was making one, or if someone was moving out of one. That's why there was a lot of crowded homes at that time, and it still happens to this day. So when we got into this house, we walked in. I remember I just walking, it's just like, wow, this is amazing. We have our own place. We could play outside soccer and so on. We could play all these different sports. I was super excited. I see there's 2 rooms. There's room 1, room 2. I was like, Mom, who's getting the rooms? She's like, well, son, over here, this will be your room. I was like, wow. Put my Ninja Turtles backpack in there, and I was super excited. Room 2, I was like, well, Mom, who's going to sleep in this room? Well, that'll be for Kendra, Farah, and Marisha. I was like, oh, okay, right on. Well, where are you going to sleep, Mom? She's like, I'll be okay. I'll sleep on this place here in the back called the couch. And my mother slept on this place for a long time. She made a decision that moment, and I asked her about this because when we were kids, that was the house that we were staying in on the screen. Around the corners was my room and my sister's room. The couch right beside where I was sitting was the place where my mom slept from grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, up until I graduated high school. So the point I'm trying to make and what this means for you is sometimes as leaders, as people that are held up here in your organizations, in your families, sometimes you have to make sacrifices to better the whole team. And sometimes those sacrifices mean that maybe you're uncomfortable while everyone else is starting to be more comfortable. My mother made that decision. We were only in grade 1. Sacrifice. I didn't realize this when I got into business, that I had to sacrifice a lot. I had to sacrifice a lot of things. So that's us as kids, and we're going through this thing, grade 1, grade 2. Grade 3 comes around. And I'm a little kid, I'm enjoying life, things are okay, and I like to play sports. I used to have to force my sister Kendra to come outside to play soccer with me. I'd be like, Mom, Kendra's not playing with me. Kendra, get outside and play with your brother. So we were very close, although I had to force her to play sports with me sometimes. One day, grade 2 comes around. My mother says, son, we're going to put you in a different school. I was getting bullied a lot. on my community. I was a very tiny kid. I get into this bus, and I'm on this bus going to this new school. And I'm thinking, I wonder where I'm going. She's like, you're going to go to this place called Cut Knife. Who's ever heard of Cut Knife before? Anyone? Okay. So Cut Knife is a small farming community. And sometimes people from Sweetgrass, Little Pine, and Palmaker First Nation get bused into Cut Knife to go to school. I happen to be one of those kids. So I get up to Cut Knife, and I remember I walked off the bus that day, and I just realized that I was different. You see, it's kind of like if you walk into a room for the first time, or you walk into a networking event, you walk into a new school, a new community, it's uncomfortable at first. You kind of get a little nervous for a lot of people. Sometimes, for some people, it's getting up on a stage and doing a presentation. You get nervous, you get uneasy, you don't know what to expect. So when I got off the bus, I knew that I was different. I knew right away. I knew that I had a little bit darker skin than some people. I knew I talked a little different, had a little different accent. I was a little different. So I was intimidated. I used to sit in the back. I used to watch the kids at recess, what they were doing. I would just listen to them. Listen, listen, listen. Fourth day comes around. I get the courage to get up to these kids. They're playing with the sport called soccer at recess. And these kids talked about certain things that were part of their lifestyle. And a lot of it was farming, right? So I remember I get up to these kids, and after, I was just trying to fit in. I remember going up to these kids, hey guys, how are your crops doing? This guy's looking at me like, hey, how much rain did you get last night, right? Lots of rain, right? And these kids are like, who is this kid? Who is this kid trying to fit in with us? But guess what? It worked. I was able to go play with these kids. We were playing soccer at recess. Grade 3, grade 4, grade 5 comes around. And there is a time where my life changed for the better, because if it wasn't for a helping hand like this, I probably wouldn't be standing here telling you this story. You see, in grade 5, my best friend, we just happened to be really close at this time, playing soccer. Every day at recess. His name was Johan. And Johan was a kid originally from South Africa. And me and him became really good buddies. And he used to play soccer on the after-school sports team, while I would get on the bus and go back home to my reserve. So one day my bus pulls up. It's about 3 o'clock. My bus pulls up. I'm ready to go home. Johan is over here. And Johan is one of those super positive people. You ever have one of those friends that no matter what you tell them, they're super positive and happy all the time, right? They're just super positive and happy. It's good to have friends like that. So Johan was like that. He used to keep me upbeat in school. I remember my bus pulls up. He's like, hey, Kendal, why aren't you playing soccer with us after school? Why don't you stay with us? Why aren't you playing with us? You're just as good as any of us on this team. Why aren't you playing with us? My bus just pulls up. I have my backpack on. And I look at my buddy Johan, and I'm like, should I tell him? Should I tell him? And I just started talking to him. I was like, you know what, Johan? This bus that just pulled up, that's my only ride to and from my reserve. I live in this place called Sweetgrass. It's about 50 minutes away. We're living on this thing called welfare. So every month we get this $200 check, and it's kind of split up between, getting food and the basic necessities. I don't even have $50 to play on this team. Our normal, and I just started to pour it out. I just, once I went on the roll, I started to tell them, my mom's the only person raising us. There's no jobs back home. The nearest job that we can get is in the city. We don't even have a vehicle to go get the job. So we're stuck. We're stuck in this place. And he kept asking questions like, we also, one of the things that we do is we collect cans and bottles all the time. We take them to the local Sarcan just for some change. I also told him that, another thing that we do is I have this bike, okay? And most of you have had a bike in some time in your lifetime. I have this bike that I love. But I only get it 2 weeks of the month, because you know where it goes? I said it goes into the local pawn shop, so we can get some more money. I said, you know what? I also have this thing called the Super Nintendo. Who remembers that? Or N64. And I would only get that for 2 more weeks, because I would go into that pawn shop, check would come in, and the pawn shop effect would take place over and over and over again. That was our normal. So I told him that, and I felt like an idiot. I jump on my bus, and I go all back home, and I'm thinking about that all night. I come back on the bus. I get up after school, and the bell rings in the morning. It's 9 o'clock, and Johan's standing there. He's super excited, and I'm like, hey, how you doing, buddy? And he's super excited here, and he's like, you know what, Kendal, come here, I want to talk to you for a second. And he comes over, and we're talking. He's like, you know what, Kendal, I told my parents everything you told me last night. And I'm like, I was like, why would you do that? He's like, no, like, just hear me out. He says, we want to help you out. I was like, what do you mean? Well, we already paid for your $50 fee to play on the soccer team. It's like, wow, okay, well, how am I, then he cuts me off. We're actually going to pick you up from your reserve tonight. Where's the reserve? I'm like, I had to draw out directions from on a piece of paper. Him and his family gave me an opportunity to play the sport soccer. I was at his house every single week, and we became best friends. So many things happened from that. And this family changed my life. I was at his house from grade 5, grade 6, grade 7. During the time I met a person, his dad. His dad became a role model for me. His dad was also named Johan. So there's 2 Johans in this family. And Johan Sr. used to say stuff like, hey Kendal, good job today. Hey Kendal, like the way you're dressed today, young man. Hey Kendal, good job at soccer today. Just all of these words of encouragement, uplifting me when I had no one else to do that for me. How many times in our organizations we don't get enough of that? And we wonder why sometimes the best employees leave. Sometimes as leaders we need to take it upon ourselves to uplift people. These simple words of encouragement go a long way for people. So we used to say stuff like that. Grade 7 comes around. Johan's like, hey, Kendal, I have some bad news. I was like, what's going on? It's like, we're moving to Saskatoon. I was like, geez. Well, what's going to happen to soccer? He's like, well, my parents want to talk to you. So I go out and talk with his parents. And his parents gift my mom, she's right there, a 1986 Ford Crown Victoria. Who remembers what those look like? All right. We call them as res boats back home, right? It's big police cars, right? Old school. So burgundy red, 1986 Ford Crown Vic. It was sitting in their yard. They weren't even using it, and they gifted it to my mom. So myself, Kendra, Fair, and Mercy can continue to play sports. That's how one family just truly changed their life in the beginning. It wouldn't stop there. There'd be other people along the way. Because after that, I went to high school, and I went to the place called North Battleford, JP2, Collegiate. And I go there for one reason, to play more sports. I go there in grade 10, and there was a coach there. His name was Doug. He was a high school physics teacher. And I was in a big gymnasium trying out for this volleyball team, and I was being very negative to myself. And Doug took it upon himself to pull me aside, and he's the guy in the top left corner of the screen. Doug took it upon himself to pull me aside because he could see this kid with no confidence, trying for this team. He had never met any of these kids before, trying as hard as he could. He pulls me aside when I had no confidence. This is what he says. Hey, Kendal, I want to talk to you for a second. I go out to the side with him. Hey, I really liked what I had seen today. I see a lot of potential in you. I want to work with you. You might not get a lot of playing time this year, but I want you to stay on my team. I see a lot of potential in you. How many times have you heard that? I see potential in you. Powerful. I stayed on his team. And every time I would see Doug in the hallway, all he would have to do, if I was up to no good, all he would have to do is stand in the corner, and he would see me come around the corner, and he would just go like this. And I would snap out of it. That's how much I respected this guy. During the high school season, there was to be another guy, his name is Andy Churko, and he was a high school club coach. And he also took it upon himself. I couldn't afford to play on this team, this club team. It was an extra fee, plus we needed to get a vehicle to get to all the different places across Saskatchewan. I couldn't do it. But he wanted me to play, and he took it upon himself to go and find places, find charities that funded me so I can play this sport. Coaches, families, all became the difference makers so I can have an opportunity. People like yourselves in this audience who have the ability to help another person, the ability to help dozens of people, hundreds of people. I was one of those people. I don't know where this charity money came from, but it came from people that are likely sitting in the same rooms just like this, donating to the same charities to give people like myself an opportunity to play sports and to keep moving forward. Right after grade 12, I had no idea what was going to happen. I went off and I played some volleyball for a few years. I come back to this place called the University of Saskatchewan. And I'm there and I'm studying to become a teacher. And I think like my life is set. And a lot of people, they go into careers, they go into jobs, and they think like this is everything I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. I get into a job, I get into post-secondary, I'm training up, taking a program, and this is all I'm ever going to do for the rest of my life. I want to challenge everyone. When you get into a new role, you get into a new education field, go into it with an open mind because you don't know where things are going to take you. You have no idea who you're going to become. But when you get it, give it everything you got. Because if you're giving it everything you got, someone's going to recognize that. Someone's going to give you an opportunity somewhere else. If you're not giving it everything, you're never going to get that. So I'm there, I'm starting to become a teacher, and I'm thinking, what's going to happen here? Last semester of my second last year of university, me and these guys were like, hey, Kendal, you want to continue playing volleyball? You know, we watched you play in college. We want you to come play volleyball with us. I was like, sure. Where are we going to play? We're going to go to this northern community in Saskatchewan, I think Beauville or Isle de Cross. I can't remember where it was. I show up to Beauville, and I couldn't see our team name on the roster. I was like, what's our team name? Kendal, don't worry about it. And he had this cheeky look on his face. And I get to the right before we're going to play, he gives us all a jersey. My buddy Justin, he's this crazy guy. And he gives us all a jersey. We put the jersey on. And there's people around this track, and they start laughing at us. I was like, why are all these people laughing at us? And I could see everyone had moose meat jerseys. We were Team Moose Meat. And I'm like, what the heck? Why is everyone called Moose Meat? He's like, Kendal, don't worry, it's cool. And then we get them to the line, and everyone's going to blow the whistle, and everyone starts laughing because they can see the back of our jerseys. And on the back of our jerseys, everyone has moose ears, moose lips, moose knuckle, moose everything. It's like, jeez. It's like, no one's going to take us serious, Justin. Don't worry about it, Kendal. Don't worry, it's cool, he would say. I was like, okay. So we started playing this sport. And then people started to give us moose calls and moose everything, kind of cheers. And then people started saying, hey, Kendal, if you had a moose meat shirt, I would totally buy that from you. It came from one person, two people, and dozens. So guess what happened? I started selling moose meat stuff. Moose meat apparel is my first business. Can you believe that? This is a kind of embarrassing story now. So this is 2010, full-time university student, and I'm selling moose meat apparel out of my backpack on campus. And suddenly, 8 months into that, I get this letter in the mail, and the mail says you can no longer use the word moose meat on any of your products. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it was a trademark letter. It was too close to a similar trademark in the West. So just like that, we got featured in the Globe and Mail. Just like that, we get this Saskatchewan Student Entrepreneur of the Year, and just the next day, I closed the company down. Guess how I felt? I felt like a complete failure. I was at a high school not long ago, and they said, this kid in the front row says loser. And I was like, yep. I was waiting for that, Steve. No, I'm kidding. So that's, right after that, remember, I went through this thing called like a little mild depression. And a lot of people go through that when they go through failures, right? When you fail at something, you've been working for something for a long time, and it doesn't work out, it hurts a lot because you've been giving everything that you have to a project, to an idea. So right after that, I changed this name. And my sonny here isn't even 1 year old. And we changed it to this company called Nietzsche Gear. So on the right side of him, I was saving up everything I could. I started to compete in these things called business planning competitions, pitch competitions. And I met a lot of business leaders in this room here today from these competitions. So I didn't know how to write a business plan. I had no idea. So I take people like yourself for Tim Hortons because I couldn't afford Starbucks yet. I was poor. And I would sit there with notepad and pen, taking notes. And I bought this thing called liveplan.com. It was a business plan software. And I wrote this business plan. I put it on. I made it really nice. I submitted to all these competitions. And then they give me this thing called a call on my phone. And they said, hey, Kendal, you have to do a business pitch now. I was like, what's a business pitch? Well, have you ever watched Dragon's Den? I was like, yeah. Well, you have to do that in front of like hundreds of people. I was like, oh my gosh. For those of you in this room, you might think that I'm a trained professional, that I've been doing this ever since I was a kid. I was the shyest kid in the room ever since I was in high school. Shyest kid. I could never get up on a stage and do something like this. So to even think about doing something like that, it terrified me. So I showed up, and out of all those competitions, I was always the only one who would tell a story. So I told stories nonstop. I got them to believe in what I was doing. And because we were able to do that, I was able to take it from a one-bedroom apartment, all of my hoodies, all of my t-shirts, and I was able to create this brand. I trademarked the brand, learned from my mistakes, and I took it from the one-bedroom apartment to office, to store, and now we're in a bunch of other stores, online and so on. This all happened because of one idea. Our mission was to help people that were once like me. Helping kids to take part in after-school activities through sports and we've helped thousands of people to this day in high schools and universities and so on. And we took it even a step further, and we created our own bursary program where we've helped people through post-secondary education. So ladies and gentlemen, I just want to tell you this one simple thing. Everything, the people in your life and the people that you're impacting along your career, we all have big goals, okay? We all have big goals to become either leaders, to do really well in our life, to make a certain amount of income, to have a family and so on. But I want to ask you a quick question. If you're able to impact people along the way and still be successful, would it be worth it? Would it be worth it? To be able to impact people and still be successful, would it be worth it? To me, that's the most important thing. You know, I have 2 children now. I have an 8-year-old, my son's 8 years old now, and my girl's 5 years old. My wife's a teacher in Saskatoon. And the most important thing out of all of this is the fact that we've been able to help people. And there's one story that illustrates this. In 2013, my very first time, we were able to make a major profit in our company. And I took a percentage of our business profit and I put it into a local charity to helping kids to take part in sports. We did this big check presentation. It was like almost $2,000. And it was the most that we've ever donated as a small company at that time. And I remember I was like, I don't know if we can even afford this, but we're going to do it anyway. And we did this whole presentation. And the next day I jumped on a flight to Phoenix, Arizona to compete in the big business plan competition. It was a $20,000 competition. I show up and I had 30 seconds on the stage, otherwise I would have got sent back home. So I had 30 seconds, I did the pitch, and I was able to make the next round. I had 5 minutes, I made the next round, I had 10 minutes, and it was the final round. I used the last round to tell the story and to share with people why we're trying to do what we do. And because we had given back, we was given back already, guess what happened? We walked out with that competition. $20,000, it was crazy. When you give something, you get something. When you give a part of something that's valuable to you, you get blessings. I was always told that as a kid. That's why a lot of First Nations family, there's a lot of kinship. There's a lot of sharing. They share a lot of things, especially people that are raised culturally. So when you're giving something, you're going to be getting blessings in the future. I want to end off with one quick story here. When I was 20 years old, I went through a tough time. Like, think about where you come from. Think about the most hardest time you had to go through in your youth. For me, it was 20 years old. I was lost, confused. A lot of my buddies, you know, were into the party scene, and I was right in there. Went through bad relationships and all that kind of stuff. My mother tells me this story of her own mother. My grandmother, my kukum, the one I talk about, her name was Emma. And Emma was a very kind person to myself. She taught me a lot of things about respect. But I didn't know her story. And one day my mom sits me down. She tells me about my kukum story. She said, you remember a long time ago when those things called the residential schools were happening? When they used to abduct First Nations children, put them in these other schools, and so on. I was like, yes, I heard about it. Well, your kukum over here, when those wagons would come around to the community, she had to go and hide from them. Some of her siblings were taken, and they wouldn't see her mom and dad after that. The reason she was able to keep a lot of her culture and her language is because she avoided them. Her husband later on, unfortunately, went to a lot of these schools, went through a lot of trauma. And when they became adults and they had my mother, Inez, and my mom was becoming a young woman, my mother, every time her father would come into the room, and sometimes he'd be intoxicated, or you know, she would get a really tight feeling in her chest. And got so bad to the point where she started to retaliate towards her father, which is super disrespectful, especially back then. And one day she kind of talked back to him. My kukum heard the conversation, pulled my mom aside outside, and she told her this one thing. She said, if you don't like the way things are right now, when you get a chance, when you need to become an adult, you go out and change it. And she left it at that. My mom became a young lady, and she had me. And I was 20 years old. I come back, and I'm lost. I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm sitting there at the table, and we're having a conversation. I'm crying, and I'm just having a hard time. She tells me the same thing. You're only 20 years old. Don't come crying here and tell me how hard life is when you haven't even tried. Go out there and make a difference for yourself. If you don't like the way things are right now, you go and change it for yourself, for your family. You still have a lot of time. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a question for you. You have a lot of people in your life, people out there in your community that need your help. It only takes one person to change their lives. Why can't it be you? Why can't it be the groups in this room here today? So I challenge everyone, whatever it is that you do from now on to wherever, however successful you become, do what you can to give back, whether it's your time, whether it's dollars, whether it's teaching other people and so on, because that's going to come back and help you in the future. I would not be here if it wasn't for people that helped me along the way. And just like you, you're going to be helping people along the way. It starts with you, the person, every single person in this room. So I want to thank you so much for having me. Have an amazing day. Thank you so much. Thank you.